Welcome to the Mean Lady Talking Podcast. This is the podcast that tackles tough questions about relationships, life, love, and loss. It may not be the advice you want, but is probably the advice you need. And now here's your host, grief therapist, motivational speaker, relationship expert, best-selling author, and attorney, the not really mean lady herself, Susan J. Elliott.
Good day, everybody. This is Susan Elliott, host of the Mean Lady Talking Podcast, and welcome back to another episode in Season 2. I have other podcasts in the works. I'm editing the Nicole Kessinger one. It's very short now that I've taken out all the things that I thought were too scathing. I have a couple of more things to do, but it's not my favorite subject. So I wanted to talk about fear of abandonment, not switching gears, and looking for approval. Now, for many years, in fact, up until the last couple of years, I refused to publicly diagnose my ex-husband. And the reason why I did that was because I wrote the book. He knew about the book. His step-granddaughter came on one of my first YouTube videos that I ever did and wrote, "Your book is a lie." And like I've said many other times, I know that he was mortified when he was served with divorce papers and the restraining order at work. I know that he went completely crazy, and the history between us could have been unusual, unique, and just about us. He told me in the knockdown drag-out fight that we had a month after we separated, and we had met at the house to try to separate things. It's something I do not suggest anyone ever do, ever, especially if somebody has been violent with you. But he definitely was violent with me first on that day. And I said to him, "Does this make you feel good?" And he said, "This is the only way I can beat you, with my fist." And another time he told me that his girlfriend, who became his second wife, never called him a moron. And I said, because that's 2 syllables, moron. And she was very monosyllabic. And he said to me in complete seriousness that after he married me and before he got into any relationships with anyone else, and there were 3 women during the time we were married, and none of them had gone to college. One was only 18. I don't know if she was going to go to college, but she was only 18. The other one was as dumb as a post, the second one. And the third one, I assume, wasn't the brightest bulb in the box, because he said to me, after we got married, he decided he would never go out with a smart woman again. And all the times that I tried to start school and go to school, and he would say, "I don't care what you do." And then halfway into the semester, he would be giving me such a hard time that I would drop out. And I almost dropped out. I had gone to Katie Gibbs for a year. Now, I was working, going to school full time, working almost full time, and my youngest was like 2 years old. And my middle son was like 3 years old, because there's only 16 months between them. I almost quit in April. It was a year-long course. I started in September, and I quit on Easter vacation because he had given me such a hard time. And then I decided no, because I was going to be liable for that student loan anyway. And I went back and I graduated. But he told me that he would never again get involved with a woman who was smarter than him. And then when we had that knockdown drag-out fight, he said to me, "This is the only way that I can beat you is with my fist." In July, when he tried to reconcile with me, he told me that when I got my job at Digital Equipment Corporation, which was in May, he knew that I had become too good for him. And he used to say these stupid things. I'm not trying to make a pun out of this, but I remember we had taken the kids on one of those little train rides. And we were both too big for the little train seat. And he was in one, I was in the other. The kids were in the other 3. And we're driving around this track. And that's what he says to me. And I said to him, "Why? Why would you think that?" And he said, "Because you're always on a pedestal. And I always see you as so smart and so capable. And when you got a job with this great corporation as a software specialist," he said, "you were way beyond me." And I said, "Is that why you need to?" And I I didn't care what the answer was at this point. I was so out of the marriage at this point. I just felt like I owed it to my kids to at least test this reconciliation thing. But I said, well, is that why you can only get involved with dumb women? And he started laughing and he said, exactly. He said, I would never get involved with a woman who was even close to as intelligent as you. And I went, okay, whatever. Anyway, the fact that he rationalized the violence as the way that he could beat me, but he wasn't threatened by other women, tells me that he wouldn't put his hand on another woman. And also, he was so mortified by getting that protection order put in place, and he couldn't get in touch with me after that. And the protection order came served to him on his job, and everybody wanted to know what it was. He worked in a hospital, which is always a hotbed of gossip. And so while he was alive, I published my book, and everything that I said in the introduction and my story about him is absolutely true because we went to court and he was there. He absolutely attended the protective order full trial. He had the opportunity to oppose what I said. Even if the judge had ruled in my favor, he had the opportunity to go on record and tell his side of the story, even to deny everything that I was saying. He didn't do any of that. He had subpoenaed all these people. He was there ready to go to battle. He had done all of these things to try to get me to back down. I didn't back down. I testified about his violence. He was right there. His lawyer stopped the proceeding, and therefore it's considered in the legal world, and I can tell you this as an attorney, in the legal world, this is considered fact. You are constitutionally entitled to notice and a hearing. If anybody accuses you of anything from a parking ticket to a murder, you are entitled to notice and a hearing. He had notice, he had a hearing. I won at the hearing. He didn't even make a sound. So when I was writing Getting Past Your Breakup and I was writing about this, my publisher and I went through it, and I had a lot more stuff. But I decided to keep it general so that those court papers could support anything that I would possibly say in a defamation suit. So as the years went on, I refused to identify my husband as a narcissist, because A, he hadn't been diagnosed, and B, I didn't want to get sued for defamation. So the past few years, I've kind of said it a little bit here, a little bit there, but I was definitely gaslighted, and I said that while he was still alive, and he never squawked about that. And I truly believe that if he wanted to sue me for defamation, he would have. He would have loved it. He would have liked nothing more than to take me on in court and win. But the reason that he didn't do that is because everything that I said was the truth. And the truth is a complete defense to defamation. But anyway, I told the story that when I went to him a couple of weeks after my second son was born, and I wanted the cookie that I was a good mom, he said to me, "You're too good, Mom." Now, fast forward 5 years, 5.5 years. My son was born in July, and this incident that I'm about to tell you happened in January. My son had turned 5 in July, and this was January. So 5.5 years later, here I am. He's coming home every night ragging on me over nothing. Absolutely nothing. The house is clean. The kids are clean. If I went out look for a job, I didn't spend enough time with the kids. If I spent time with the kids, I didn't go out looking for a job. If I cleaned the house, went out looking for a job, spent time with the kids, I didn't do grocery shopping. There was always something. And my head, and again, when you're a normal person and you don't gaslight somebody, you cannot believe that there's no way to win. 5.5 years later, I'm still looking for the cookie. I've not gotten approval all these years. None. And so 5.5 years later, I'm at the absolute end of my rope. And every day he's coming home. Every day. And I've told the story. He always waxed the floors. Now, on the weekends, I would take care of the kids. I would go shopping, And I would do spring cleaning every single weekend. I polished brass every weekend, and we had a lot of brass. We had a historical house that was full of beveled glass and stained glass, and we had this huge mirror over the fireplace that was from the mantle to the ceiling. I had to be careful, but I cleaned that glass, all the glass in the house, including that giant mirror over the fireplace, which in the wintertime, which this was, would get sooty because we would run the fireplace on the weekends. And he was off during the week, like Wednesday and Thursday. And I would come and I would look at the phone bill, and he would be spending hours on the phone to this one phone number. And at the time, long distance calls were like anywhere over like a half an hour from where you lived, and they would come up on your phone bill. He would keep all his phone numbers next to the phone. So I matched up the phone number that was on my bill with the phone number on the phone, and the name was Dawn. And I was like, Dawn? I've never even heard him talk about somebody named Dawn. Like, who is this Dawn? Like, he's talking to Dawn like 2-3 hours every day off. And then he was taking his grandmother and my mother shopping. They used to go to the grocery store. They used to go to the Twinkie store. The Twinkie store was the Hostess wholesale place. And there was another wholesale place that they would go. But they were like shopping maniacs. And then on the next day, he would be on the phone again with Dawn, for 3 hours. And I found out that Dawn was the name of his girlfriend's husband, it was not actually Dawn. And when I figured this all out, I felt like a moron. I don't know where he's getting all this. Oh, you're so smart. Because I was acting really stupid at the time. And if there was nothing going on, there'd be no reason for him to pretend that he has this great friendship with this guy, Dawn, that I've never heard of. And I didn't ask him about it because I was at the point where I just didn't think he was going to tell me the truth. And I didn't even want to know. So I would do spring cleaning all weekend long. And it was not good enough. Working all week, and it was not good enough. And he used to complain that he waxed all the floors, and we had hardwoods throughout the first floor, but we had carpets downstairs in the finished basement and upstairs. So he only waxed the living room, the dining room, the foyer, and the kitchen. So during this hiatus from work, and I had gotten laid off like the first or second week of January, and this is like the third week. I mean, I'm fairly new at being laid off. And I decide one night that I'm going to wax the floors and just show him that I'm trying to be a good doobie, and I'm going to try to give him a break from the stuff that he does on his days off. And he comes in that night and he says, and I apologize to those of you who have heard this story a million times, he says, "You left streaks on the floor just so I would never ask you to wax the floors again." And I was crushed. I mean, I was absolutely crushed. And I'm begging him to believe me that I did not leave streaks on the floor on purpose, and he hadn't asked me to wax the floors, and I didn't expect that he was going to ask me to wax the floors. I was trying to do it as a nice gesture. And there I am begging him to believe me. And I will tell you that since that time, since I got over all that stuff, I vowed that never again would I deal with people that are assigning all this negative stuff to my actions which are not true. I just don't deal with it anymore. If you're someone close to me, someone that I love, I'll give you 2 or 3 chances where I'll explain it and I'll ask you not to do that. But after like 3 times, we're done. We're absolutely done. And I don't care who you are. I don't care who you are. You do it to me 3 times and you're gone. I absolutely, absolutely, absolutely hate it. Don't tell me what my intentions are. Don't tell me what I'm thinking. Don't tell me what I'm feeling. It's not going to happen. Too many years being gaslighted. Too many years my mother doing it to me. Too many years of my husband doing it to me. Not happening. Not now. Not ever. So there I am in this robot mode trying to get his approval. 5.5 years of trying to get this man's approval and failing every single time and blaming myself for it. So it's Tuesday night. I'm cooking a roast on a Tuesday night. We normally only had roast on the weekends, and normally he liked to cook them because he liked them a certain way, and I apparently didn't know how to cook them that way. And we used to do stuffed potatoes where we would bake the potatoes, we would scoop out the insides, we would mash the potatoes, the inside of the potatoes, we'd mash them with butter and milk and then put them back in the shells and bake them again. We always made those with the roast, so I made And he wasn't a big vegetable eater, but I made vegetables anyway. I make the roast beef because, again, I'm trying to do something that he's always done. He always made the roast. And sometimes his parents would insult me because he did all the cooking. They didn't think that that was very masculine. So I had heard some nonsense from his family about, why does he always do the cooking? Well, because he hates my cooking and it doesn't matter what I cook. He used to say to me, oh, try going to the stove. It's that big white thing in the kitchen, that giant cigarette lighter. It's a gas stove, and a lot of people would come by and they would just light their cigarette off the burners. That's what people did when they were still smoking inside. And so he would say, well, try using that giant cigarette lighter in the kitchen. The big white thing, the big cigarette lighter. So he used to say things like that to me. And it was a joke, and everybody would laugh. Ha ha ha, so funny. So I was using the giant cigarette lighter to try to make a roast. And I was very good at making a roast. I don't care what he said. To this day, I'm a killer roast maker. So I'm making a roast on a Tuesday night. I get the kids washed and dressed in dress clothes. The three of them sitting there, shiny, happy children. Roast is in the oven. Baked potatoes are in the oven, and I got the blender out or whatever it is I'm going to make the inside of the potatoes with. I got some vegetables on the stove for me and the kids. And I run and I shower and I put on makeup, which I didn't even have much makeup. And I didn't have a professional haircut. I didn't have professional highlights until after we were gone. And most of the time I didn't have a professional haircut. I used to cut my own hair. He didn't want me to even spend money on a haircut. And I got out a wool skirt that I had just bought for his Christmas party the month before, which he didn't even want me to go to because his girlfriend was there, which, again, I felt really stupid after I remembered them dancing at the Christmas party when all this came to light. So I put on my gray skirt and a nice sweater, and I did up my hair, and I put on some makeup, and I looked outside, and it's snowing like crazy. And he's at work. And I had suspected that something was going on with him and someone else. And when he would come home 2-3 hours after his work shift, when for so many years he came in 45 minutes to an hour after his shift was over, now all of a sudden it's taking him 2-3 hours to get home. I was already suspicious, but I saw the snow and I was like, okay, he always shovels the walk. Now here I am, in dress clothes, with a roast on, and 3 kids sitting at a table looking at me like, why are we sitting here? On a Tuesday afternoon, looking at the clock, waiting for Dad to come in. And I'm telling them, no noise, no fighting, nothing. Just sit there and be quiet. Your father will be home any minute. And I run outside like a fool, and I start shoveling the walk like a lunatic. I want to prove to him that I am a good wife. All this, the roast, the potatoes, the children, the outfit. Now I'm shoveling. The house is spotless. And he calls me and says he's not coming home. It's snowing too hard. And I flip out. Absolutely flip out. I can see me in my mind's eye to this day, pacing back and forth in our bedroom, screaming into the phone that if he doesn't come home, I'm putting the children in the car and I'm coming to get him. Now, neither one of us had four-wheel drive cars. He had an old car. It was a classic car. It was a 1950 something. I forget what it was. It was like a Chevy, but it was the type of car that in the snow, it would fishtail. It was a big car. I had a Toyota Camry and it was front wheel drive. So I told him that I was putting the kids in the car and I was coming to get him. And he's like, no, you're not. You're crazy, Papa. I could not stop. I mean, I think we argued for like 2 hours and I was hysterical. And I'm looking at this whole night just going right down the tube. Everything that I was trying to do was about to come crashing down around me. When I described this to the woman who would become my therapist a few weeks later, when I found her, when I crawled in there, she said to me, you're not able to switch gears. And I was like, oh yeah, right. Okay. So okay, like I've been that way. I mean, I was so hysterical that night, and not being able to get him home was one of my lowest points. And I talk about the gift of desperation all the time. And that night was part of my gift of desperation. I was so beside myself. And I never wanted to feel like that again. Never, ever, ever. And it took me a couple of years to learn how to switch gears. And I'll tell you, I was listening one time to the Betty Broderick case. And if you don't know the Betty Broderick case, she was somebody who put her husband through medical school and then law school. And she had 4 children and she was the perfect wife and all this and that. And he was screwing around on her with his half her age secretary. And she was hysterical. Dan Broderick was his name. And she dumped the kids at his house one time and said, okay, here they are, they're yours, you take care of them. Because she thought that if she dumped the kids at his house, then he and his girlfriend couldn't go frolicking on the beach. But he just kept the kids. So then she decided that was a really bad idea and she wanted to come back and get the kids. And he wouldn't let her have the kids. And as soon as their divorce was final, and she got pretty screwed in the divorce. It sounds like she got a lot of money, but she got like $16,000 a month, but he was making 10 times more that or something. But it was not a lot of money compared to what he was making. So she did get screwed in the divorce, and she had given up most of her income and earning potential for him. She was very angry, and he started recording her conversations and her messages. And one day, she goes over there with a gun, and she basically kills both of them in their bedroom. And her story was that she was going over there to blow her brains out in front of them. But that's not what happened. At trial, her first trial resulted in a hung jury, and the prosecutor was criticized. And as a lawyer, I was really interested in this, but the prosecutor was roundly criticized for not really going after her. So the second trial, they knew exactly what she was going to say. And she changed her story. If you're ever on trial, don't ever change your story. It's like, you don't want to change your story from trial to trial. I mean, she was adding things and elaborating, and then the prosecutor, who had been criticized for not going after her the first time, now had the transcript from the first trial say, excuse me, at the first trial, you never mentioned that. Why are you making this up now? So the jury didn't believe her, and then she was convicted. But one of the things that they played was her son had to be, 10, 12 years old, and he was begging her to stop saying bad words. And she was saying things to him like, but you don't understand, your father was fucking his secretary. I mean, she's saying this. Like, I never used the F word to my kids. I remember when my middle son was 16 and I was so angry with him. It was just one thing after another, after another, after another with him. And I was so angry with him. I said something like, fuck you, Michael, something like that. Tears sprang to his eyes, like he couldn't believe that I said that to him. And I think that he couldn't believe I said it to him because he had never heard me say that before. And none of my kids were allowed to swear in the house, and I tried not to swear around them, but we never swore to each other, like ever. So for her, and she repeated it 2 or 3 times on the phone with him, and the fact that his father was recording this conversation, it was so detrimental to her in trial. But when I was listening to her, how out of control she was, I was thinking, oh my goodness, the expression, but for the grace of God go I felt like that night where I could not switch gears, I could have easily been Betty Broderick. The night that he went after the kids for the second night in a row, and then he pulled the dog down the stairs by putting his belt over his neck and pulling him down the stairs, that if there had been a weapon in the house that night, one of us would have been dead. I would have had no hesitation when I saw him pulling that dog down the stairs, lifting him up, an 80-pound Doberman, lifting him up off the ground with his belt around his neck, choking the poor thing. If I had a gun, I would have blown his brains out. And I had a huge black eye. For those who think my book is a lie, just check out Miriam Hospital medical records for January 19, whatever it was, and I will show you, because the emergency room doctor didn't believe me that I fell down the stairs. And at that time, there was no mandated reporting in emergency rooms. But that doctor did not believe me, and he told me point blank he didn't believe me, and I stuck to my story. And of course, my ex said it was my fault because I held on to the banister instead of just being thrown down the stairs. I should have just gotten tossed down the stairs. but I was trying to defend my children who were sleeping, and I got a huge black eye for that. So had I shot him, I would have had, my eye was closed the next day. That was the last night. The next day I had packed his things and set them out for him. I have said many times that had there been a weapon in the house that night, I would have blown his brains out. I absolutely, positively would have blown his brains out. And I might have done it the night before when I saw him marching the kids down the stairs because my heart broke. To this day, I can see him. One's wearing blue footy pajamas, one's wearing yellow footy pajamas. And they're rubbing their eyes and their hair's all tousled, and one had very curly hair and one had very straight hair, and the two of them are walking down like zombies, and they're practically slipping on the stairs that I just waxed. And I'm thinking that they're going to fall to their death, and their father's marching them downstairs to pick up one Fisher-Price toy. Baloney. And these are all the things that happened at the end of my marriage. And when people want to say that I'm a liar about this stuff, I would truly like to punch them in the face. Because no, I lived through this. My kids lived through this. And don't tell me this didn't happen. I know this friggin' happened. It would be hard for me to make all this crap up. Anyway, I also, after we separated, and I was so upset and so distraught and so like beside myself, and I was being treated for clinical depression and all this other stuff. And somebody heard me in a support group one night just raging about them. This was a few months later. And the guy was from New York and I was from New York, and this was in Rhode Island. And he came up to me after and he said, I know somebody who could take care of things for you. And I was like, what? But he's like, you're from New York. I'm not from New York. You know what I'm talking about. And I was like, yeah. And it was like there was this menu of choices. I could have him killed. I could have him beat up. I could have him and his girlfriend beat up. And there was this one thing about, he said, we could just shame them. Like we could kidnap them. Not me, but them. They could kidnap them and take all their clothes off and dump them on the side of the road. So they would have to walk from the side, from wherever they were to wherever with no clothes on. And I was like, well, that's a walk of shame if I ever heard one. And that was the one that I was kind of leaning toward. But he really was kind of pushing the break the kneecaps of my ex option. But I hadn't filed for child support. I hadn't filed for divorce. I wasn't getting any child support. And I kept thinking, if he just breaks his legs, I'm not going to get any money because he's not going to be working. So a couple of weeks after that, but I'm considering this. I am considering this. That's how angry I was. And a couple of weeks later, he introduces a guy to me. It was so funny because a guy comes up to me, and if you ever saw the movie I Love You to Death, which is based on a true story, Keanu Reeves and William Hurt. If you ever saw the movie I Love You to Death, one of my favorite movies of all time. My husband Michael was a huge Kevin Kline fan. After I introduced him to him, he didn't know pop culture at all. Every movie he saw that was made after like 1970. We saw it through me because I turned him on to it. But we watched all the Kevin Kline movies. He loved rom-coms. He loved I Love You to Death. We all loved that movie. But Keanu Reeves and William Hurt play these morons who are trying to kill Kevin Kline, who's the cheating husband. And so Kevin Kline comes out. They tried to dope him and they were going to shoot him, and it's this crazy, crazy movie, but one of them, I think it was Keanu Reeves, doesn't recognize who Kevin Kline is. And William Hurt says it's the guy. And Keanu Reeves like, the guy? And William Hurt's like, the guy, like the guy we came to kill. And my family had that as a running joke for years. Be like, it's the guy. The guy? Yeah, the guy. This was one of them. Like, when I saw that movie, I was like, oh, I know that guy. The one that was going, the guy? Not the smarter one going, yeah, the guy. Like, he's the guy we came here to kill. This was absolutely that. These were those guys. And the guy that he brought up from New York to inflict pain and horrible things on my ex and his girlfriend was the guy. Like, he was so stupid. I had a half a conversation with him that day. And I was like, no. This guy does anything. Like, if he breathes near my ex, I'm going to jail. And honest to God, I was so angry at the time that the only reason nothing happened was because this guy was so stupid. That's the only reason this didn't happen. So to get back to Betty Broderick, who's standing in the bedroom of Dan and Linda Broderick holding a gun, when I'm listening to the testimony, even though she was a terrible witness for herself, they moved and I moved and I went, and the gun went off. It's like the Jodi Arias, guns don't just go off. Actually, you have to pull the freaking trigger. So her testimony was ridiculous, but when I was listening to her and her hysteria around that whole time, I thought, but for the grace of God, go I. Or but for the powers of the universe, whatever it is you believe in, I could have easily been Betty Broderick. Easily. And I knew at the time, especially talking to the guy, that I needed to get my act together really quickly. I came back from that meeting thinking, I almost hired a hitman, like the dumbest hitman in the world. I've talked on the Chris Watts thing and the Ryan Poston thing that I'm a big gun control advocate. And this is one of the reasons why. I honestly feel like a lot of murders, and I've watched every episode of 24 seasons of Snap, a lot of these murders would not take place if the person didn't have a gun in the house. I wasn't strangling anyone. I wasn't poisoning anyone. The whole antifreeze thing that people do, no. I couldn't handle doing that to somebody. It would have to be quick and painless. I know the anger that I had, and I'm a huge nonviolent person. Grew up in the Bronx. My ex and I, we were together. He's from Brooklyn. I was from the Bronx. We kicked people's doors down. Some people went over. They stole our kids' little cars, those little yellow and orange cars you might have seen. They came in our yard and took them and then had them in their yard. And we went over there like guns blazing, only we didn't have guns. It was just the two of us. And he kicks the door in. People are screaming, and there was like 20 people in there. We did the same thing when we had to get rid of people. The first house that we bought, we kicked people's doors in. We took their dog. One people left their Doberman in there because they thought that we wouldn't go in their apartment with the Doberman. I went in the apartment, took the apartment and the dog. The dog was mine until she passed away. And so we were not opposed to kicking people's doors down and kicking people's asses. We both grew up on the streets. We knew how to do that. But how close I came to being homicidally angry is scary. And one of the things that I want to tell people, if you have fear of abandonment, and that was what was driving me all the time, my inability to switch gears, my intense anger, my trying to get approval, all these things were all funneled through my fear of abandonment. That's the way I saw everything. When you have fear of abandonment, when you have anxious attachment, when you have attachment issues, and I'm going to write about this in my next book that I've already started, I'm going to crowdfund. So if you're interested in that, please let me know. Write to Susan at gettingpastyourbreakup.com. If you're interested in that, I'm going to launch it in the next few weeks, and I hope everybody's with me on that. I'm also going to launch a workshop and a seminar weekend, so if you're interested in that, let me know. Get on the newsletter. If you go to the Getting Past Your Breakup page on Facebook, there's a page and a group. If you go to the page, there is something on the left-hand side that says sign up for our newsletter. Go there and all those announcements will go into the newsletter. So go there and sign up, please. Anyway, this is the solution. Self-soothing. What is self-soothing? Self-soothing is a cross between meditation and affirmation. It's about sitting with yourself and telling yourself that everything is going to be okay no matter what. If you wanted to talk someone else off a ledge, this is you talking you off a ledge. I'm going to do an entire thing on this. And it's one reason why I'm mentioning it now, because I really would like to know what questions you have, because I use those terms a lot, self-soothing. And people will say to me, I don't know what you mean by that. And I'm going to give you a little capsule version of this, but if you have questions, please send them to meanladytalkingpodcast@gmail.com or Susan at gettingpastyourbreakup.com, and we will talk about this. I had to learn to self-soothe. I had to learn that if I'm angry, it means that something in my life isn't working. If I'm hurt just happens. You can't control being hurt when you love people. Hurt is hurt. Grief is grief. We all deal with grief. I've tried to do my part. I've spent years researching this. I've written extensively on it. I do a lot of grief counseling. And I hope that everybody stays really on top of the Grief Podcast because it really explains it all and it represents years of my research. And I hope that people kind of carry the message to others about grief and its ramifications. Grief, you can't do anything but work through it. My husband Michael is going to be gone 10 years this year, and I still grieve him. It's still hard. And like that, like I didn't know that I was going to start crying. And people will say, how can you still be crying 10 years later? And it's like, trust me, I don't want to be crying 10 years later. I'm a grief counselor. I've read every book there is. I know everything about grief. And I truly believe you could get over a breakup and you can heal and go on and, whatever. It's not that I never have grief over my first marriage. It's very rare. But every now and again, I get into some headspace around what the hell happened there. Because the person that I fell in love with was a great guy, but it was the narcissist. It was the narcissist who rescued me. It was the narcissist who was the only one willing to take on my crazy boyfriend who was stalking me, who was coming after me. My first husband physically took him on, called him out. My ex-boyfriend went after him with an axe. And it was like people were saying to me that he was circling and circling and circling. They were circling each other. And my ex-boyfriend had an axe in his hand. And I remember that he didn't hit him with the axe, but I remember people telling me about it because he didn't tell me, but neither one of them told me about it. But all my friends told me about it, and it was apparently drew quite the crowd. So I would have that guy in my head when I was having trouble letting go of the marriage. But I also had terrible abandonment issues and terrible fear of abandonment. And I had to learn how to self-soothe. And I also had to learn about anger. Now, anger comes out. You do your journaling, and I wrote so many letters to my ex that I never sent. My therapist turned me on to no contact in the late 1980s, early 1990s. She said NC, I said NC, nobody else in my entire life said NC. And when I came on the scene on the internet and I started talking NC, all of a sudden now everybody in the world is doing NC. But I can tell you that my therapist wanted me to go NC because she wanted me to funnel my anger into my journal. And that's what I did. And I had this big loose leaf journal. And one night I'm writing, and I'm just like, I hate you. I hate you. I hate you. And the next thing I knew, I was writing I all across one page, the next page, hate, the next page, you, and taking up, and then I'm stabbing the paper with my pen. Yeah, I hate you, I hate you, I hate you. If I had a gun, I would have shot my journal. That's how angry I was. But I did get that anger out. I was able to get that anger out with nobody getting killed. Trust me, for a long time, that was touch and go. But I didn't kill anybody. I didn't go to jail. I didn't go to prison, and nobody was murdered. But I had to learn how to self-soothe. And I tell people, please, now the new workbook is coming out the beginning of February. I'm a little bit behind on it because I'm having somebody help me with the PDF. The fillable PDF can be really gnarly sometimes, and I've run into a few issues with it, and now I have to hire somebody to help. If you know how to do fillable PDF from a Word document and you want to help me, let me know. Susan at gettingpastyourbreakup.com. But I tell people, self-soothing is absolutely vital. You have to learn how to do it. You have to learn to meditate. You have to learn to do relaxation. There are a million relaxation and meditation audios on the internet. There's many free ones on YouTube. Please find them. Please do them. I had a set of relaxation tape, and then later on I got into meditation, and none of them were free, and I always had to go find them because there was no self-help section in the bookstore. I had to go to 12-step bookstores, and a lot of times they didn't have meditation tapes, so I had to go other places and look for them. And I used to go to this meditation center in New York, but now it's like so easy. Do some of your self-soothing. Learn how to switch gears. If anything I've said to you about me not being able to switch gears, ranting and raving that night on the phone, because my expectations that he was going to come in and go, oh my God, I have this lovely wife in lovely clothes with lovely children and a lovely meal and a clean house, that was never going to happen. That was never going to happen. I hadn't gotten that yet. He was not going to come in and give me a pat on the head. I wasn't going to get the cookie any more than I had gotten the cookie 5.5 years before with the good mom. I wasn't getting it. Not now, not ever. That night, shoveling the walk in dress clothes with dress shoes on and almost killing myself out there for a guy who can't even be bothered to come home. Well, I have 3 kids sitting at the table going, what the hell's going on? I could have been the most insane person ever raising children, maybe after Betty Broderick, because I really don't know if I would have sworn. I don't think I would have told my 10, 12-year-old son, your father's fucking the secretary. But who knows? I mean, she was unhinged. I was unhinged. But I was never getting his approval. Never, ever, ever. And thank God I wasn't going to get his approval. Because a lot of narcissists, a lot of sociopaths will kind of give it to you and take it back, give it to you and take it back. He would never give it to me. So it was fabulous. And if a birthday came, I didn't get a gift, it was my fault. If anniversaries, I never got one anniversary present from him for over 10 years of marriage. I never got a Valentine's Day gift from him over 10 years of marriage. I never got the approval. He didn't do the typical, I love you, go away thing. I love you, now go away. Or I love you, now go away. He would do the freeze out and then he'd come back like nothing happened. He never gave me the approval. I had to give it to myself. Please learn to give yourself your own approval. And if anybody tries to tell you what you're thinking, what you're feeling, what your intentions are, oh, you only wax these floors so that I would never ask you to do them again, any nonsense like that, please stop having these battles in your head. Please stop trying to win approval from these people. Please learn how to self-soothe. And if you have any questions about that, any of this, please send the questions to meanladytalking@gmail.com. And hey, let's be careful out there. I'll talk to you all soon. Take care all. Bye-bye.